Hello. Right, hello everyone, welcome back to Crawford-Kana. Today we have a very exciting video for you. Just recently there was a massive 332 player Lorcana tournament known as the Galactus Grand Prix. Now today we are going to be covering the top 8 deck lists for this event. Well, I say top 8. Unfortunately, the 8th deck list hasn't actually been submitted, so a little bit limited. We are going to be going for the top 7 deck lists today. But not to worry, the top 7 is spicy. We like it. Really, really exciting stuff. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start off in 7th place and then I'm going to work my way through. I'll talk about what's in the decks and potentially some of the lines and combinations they might have been looking for in each of the decks, and then maybe go through some interesting matchups for them. But without further ado, let's get on with the video. So, in 7th place, we have Matio Amarosi. Apologies if I do say any of these names wrong. Matio was running Old Faithful itself, Emerald Amethyst discard, which if you've seen any of my videos, you know has been doing well in other tournaments. We, of course, have Diablo Obedient Raven at 4 copies, and then another 4 copies of Diablo Maleficent Spy, followed by Diablo Spiteful Raven, 3 copies of that. The whole reason for this package is shift in Diablo Devoted Herald to be able to get that draw engine running. So really nice package to begin with. We have 4 copies of Ursula Deceiver ready to snipe those songs with 2 copies of Mim Fox. A little bit surprised at 2 copies of Mim Fox. I personally prefer 4 ofs for Emerald Amethyst, but worked well for this gentleman. We have 3 copies of Merlin Crab, which I think is the right number, and 4 copies of Diablo Devoted Herald. We have 3 copies of Prince John. Obviously, when Prince John is on the field, if a card is discarded from your opponent's hand, you draw a card, followed by 3 copies of Genie and 2 copies of Yargo. Yargo is starting to see a little bit more play with the Emerald Amethyst decks, and I'm glad to see it back in there. I have to admit, without a copy of Pan Shadow Finder, I'm a little bit more reluctant. I feel like Yargo can just disappear very quickly, especially with all the steel that's in the meta at the minute. However, it's a beefy card and it acts as a bit of a lightning rod to protect your other characters. So happy to see that. We also have a new copy of Chip Quick Thinker. Chip is a brand new card for set 8, and when you play this character, your opponent chooses and discards a card. So just to ramp up that discard package, another way to get your Prince John running. We also have a single copy of Bell Accomplished Mystic, adding in a little bit of ping damage. Now, I've not seen Bell a lot in Emerald Amethyst at the minute, but I'm glad to see it. Sometimes we struggle a little bit with removal. So Bell Accomplished Mystic, when you play her, you get to move up to 3 damage onto an opposing character, which can be really useful to just clear off some of the trickier characters on the board. Only one of, to be fair, but as a 5 cost for this deck, I think that's fine. We have 3 copies of Elsa the Fifth Spirit, and then 2 copies of Cricky Lucky Cricket. Cricky giving +3 to every character on the field when it's played on your side. We have 1 copy of Ursula Sea Witch Queen. I do love to see that in Emerald Amethyst. I'm personally a fan of 2 of her, but really great card, being able to exert your opponent's characters when she quests for 3, and then also has the ability that opponents cannot sing with their characters, so really useful there. We have a single copy of Improvise. Chosen character gets +1 this turn. Draw a card. 1, a nice bit of draw. 2, also usable to shift Diablo. Get rid of an action. We have 4 copies of Pull the Lever and 3 copies of Wrong Lever. Can see they've went up a little bit on the copies of Pull. Does make sense to me. You're getting more options from the discard and the draw. Wrong Lever can feel a little bit bricky if you've not already hit the Pull the Lever, but at least you get to return to your opponent's hand. We then have 4 copies of Sudden Chill, 4 copies of Friends on the other side, and 3 copies of We Don't Talk About Bruno. I'm not the biggest fan of We Don't Talk About Bruno. With Bruno, you get to return a card to their player's hand, and then at random, the player discards a card. Of course, it works really well with John because they're discarding, so you get to draw, but 5 costs for what it does just doesn't seem great for me. So that's something I'd potentially be looking at swapping myself. Moving on to 6th place, we have Steel Song with, oh, this is a hard name to say, bear with me. We have Santangelo Emmanuel. If that is how you say it, I'll be really impressed. That name sounds phenomenal. Now, this deck that he's running looks like it is more along the side of the traditional Steel Song, which is nice to see because we've seen a lot of the Amber Steel aggro package. So something a little bit different, but not too far from what it was in set 7. The main additions here being the Rhino package. We, of course, have 4 copies of Cinderella and then 4 copies of the new Rhino card. So when you play this character, chosen opposing character gets -1 strength until the start of your next turn. We have 4 copies of Troubadour. Troubadour is nice in the steel matchups, but I'm a bigger fan of Ursula just for the 1/4 stat line. I think she blends into Rapunzel a bit better. 4 copies of Ariel Spectacular Singer, and only 2 copies of Lawrence. Jealous Manservant. not too keen on that. Lawrence is one of my favourite steel cards, and for me, I'm always running at least 3 or 4. Being a 4/4 when he's got no damage is just so beefy, questing for 2, and then once again, great Rapunzel fuel. Something I might look at pushing up a little bit there. We have 4 copies of Pete to block the actions, 2 copies of Prince Naveen. I've seen some people run some extra copies of Naveen, but I think 2 is plenty. 1 is possibly enough for the deck, but 2 I think is a nice safe number. 4 copies of Rapunzel gifted with healing to act as your draw engine, and then 4 copies of the shift line for Rhino. So while this character has no damage, gets +2 resist, which is absolutely huge. It's a nightmare to get rid of, and it's really hard for steel cards to deal with. We have 2 copies of Miss Bianca, which is why we'll be running Troubadour instead of Ursula, alongside 2 copies of Cinderella Stouthearted. A load of people drop Cinderella Stouthearted, but I think it's such a nice card. Having the resist on her means she sticks on the board for a while, unless they're running something like Dragonfire or Hades. But questing for 3 with a 5/5 stat line, you can't go wrong with it. We have 2 copies of the Bare Necessities. Chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of your choice. I do like that card, giving you extra information. Frank Carston interestingly said that he's not a fan of this card because he doesn't want to try and remember the information in his opponent's hands. So that's quite an interesting take. For me, I quite enjoy knowing what my opponent has there. I know what I'm expecting to see come out. But yeah, it's a valid point that if you do have too much going on that you try to process, it can put you off your own game. We have 2 copies of World's Greatest Criminal Mind, just to pop some of the bigger characters, banish a chosen character with 5 strength or more. 4 copies of Storm, 4 copies of Strength as standard. We have 4 copies of Zeus, 4 copies of Whole New World, and then what I do like to see, the brand new Beyond the Horizon. Lovely bit of tech card. I'm running this in my Steel Song at the minute. I think it's so exciting. So Beyond the Horizon, you can sing together for 7 cost, and then choose any number of players. They discard their hand and draw 3 cards each. So what you can do here is you can choose just your opponent after you've played a Whole New World, sing the Beyond the Horizon, make them get rid of that 7 they just drew, and then draw 3 cards. At that point, you have milled them a total of 17 cards, which is nuts. But it's also useful for you because if you start to run out of cards after your Whole New World, you can then play that, refill your hand back to 3. So really useful card. Yeah, I like that. Exciting deck. The Rhino package is nice to it. And I think it's a nice little counter to the more aggro decks that we're seeing. So yeah, great shout there. Really like that one. Coming in on 5th place, we have the big, the bad, the beautiful, the amazing Ruby Amethyst Evasive. I always really like to see Ruby Amethyst do well in a tournament, just because it always seems to fall off at the start of the set, and then right at the end, it comes right back again. Now, we're not too far off our normal package here, bar a couple of tech cards. This does seem very familiar to the No I'm Not list that he had built a few weeks ago towards the CCS. But yeah, a nice kind of standard list here. So we have a total of 10 copies of 1-drops. I'm a little bit against this personally. I've dropped my 1-drops down on my Ruby Amethyst. I just find that they're dying that quickly, that there isn't much use to them. And then also, when I pull them later in the game, I don't like it too much. I personally only run 4 copies of Diablo, but this gentleman has 4 copies of Chernobog, 4 copies of Diablo, and 2 copies of Magic Broom. And their name is Papi Stefano, but you can see it up there, so you don't need me to tell you. You don't need me to say the name wrong. We have 4 copies of Ursula, Mad Sea Witch Queen. Mad Sea Witch even. She's a nice little addition to the deck. She's given that kind of extra that Rafiki does in my deck. Challenger +2, so having the 3/3 stat line is really, really nice, especially for a 2 cost, but also we're running the shift in the deck. I'm not sure how I feel about the shift line in Ruby Amethyst. I just found that it didn't work too much in my testing, but if you can get out nice and early on that turn 5, definitely a great addition. We have 4 copies of Madam Mim Fox for our bounce engine, as well as 3 copies of Merlin Crab and 3 copies of Pan Shadowfinder. Because we are utilising Maui Shark in this deck, I would personally prefer Pan to be on 4 copies. I think that would just sit a little bit nicer. I'd be worried that I wouldn't see him, and then I don't get that rush benefit, especially since we have so many evasives. We have 4 copies of Genie, and then 2 copies of Yargo. Once again, the same with Pan. Being able to go Pan into Yargo and then sing Friends with Pan is a really clutch turn for Ruby Amethyst. We have 4 copies of Elsa, and then, ho-ho! Marry Hero to All is back. Can you believe it? I don't know why people dropped him, to be honest. Like, yes, he's a big, he's expensive to get out, but he's just so useful for those board clears. I know we don't see as many locations, but, with DKP doing so well at the World Champs, I'm expecting a lot of manas to be about. So cards like Maui being able to barrel rush in for 6 is really, really useful, and I definitely think something to be in the deck. maybe consider 2 of for me. But yeah, definitely nice to see it. We also have returning back from the depths of despair, Mana Medusa the Boss. When you play this card, you get to banish a card with 3 strength or less. Only 1 of as well, so just a bit of a tech card here. 4 copies of Maui Shark as standard. And then we have the addition of the new Hades card, Ruthless Tyrant. So this card's really exciting for me, and I really like seeing it in Ruby Amethyst now. It works so well with the library, especially when you've got the lower cost 1 cost in the deck. So when you play this card, you get to deal 2 damage to another chosen character of yours and draw 2 cards. But, you can also do it when he quests. So if you were to have a card like Diablo, for example, in your library, when Diablo goes, you get to draw a card. When it's in the library and a card goes, you get to draw another card. With Hades' effect, you get to draw 2 cards. So if I was to play out Hades and pop a Diablo in my library, that's 4 cards I'm getting to draw just for playing that card. And you've got a 3/6 stat line on the board. And it's a 7 cost, so it means you can sing B-Prep. I think Hades is such a nuts card. I'm seeing mainly 1 copy of it in most decks, but for me, I'm looking at 2 personally. I think that's massive swing in tempo. We have 1 copy of Ursula Sea Witch Queen, like I said from earlier, and then 3 copies of Brawl. A lot of people dropping down to 2, which I think is a safe number, but with the rise of purple-green and lots of Diablo decks, it is a good answer for Diablo, but maybe just keeping that pan cost up would probably be more useful. Also good for the Steel Song as well to pop the aerial, so 3 I don't hate too much. We have 1 copy of Finders Keepers. Once again, for me, that's a card I like to see more of. I'm wanting at least 3 or 4 in the deck just because it's so clutch for giving us the extra draw. Of course, Hades is doing something similar, but being able to draw 3 cards and then cycle it back with Maui Shark seems absolutely clutch to me. 1 copy of Dragonfire, which I don't hate, just for that extra bit of banish. 4 copies of Friends on the other side. 3 copies of Pirate's Life, just for that burn, reduce some lore from your opponent's totals and boost yours up. If you've got 2 Maui Sharks on the field and play a Pirate's Life, it's just game over. You just win. Absolutely nuts. 3 copies of Be Prepared. I'm still a bit of a coward and like to play with 4, but if you're brave enough to play 3, sure, go for it. And then 3 copies of the library. So, lovely deck from Papi Stefano there. Moving on to 4th place, we have Amber Steel Aggro. Look at that. Zoom it away. Super duper exciting, you know? So, we're of course running 4 copies of Cinderella, 4 copies of Daisy, and 4 copies of Rhino. We expect to see that as standard in the Amber Steel decks. Penny is a nice little addition. When you play her, if you remove damage from a character, you get to give resist 1 to that character. She also quests for 2, which is really nice. So she can be really clutch going down on something like your Cinderella just to protect her for another turn, or even Rhino if you're waiting for the shift, or even Piglet. We do like Piglet getting the resist here. So Piglet we're running 4 copies of. You know what Piglet does, gets +2 lore if you have 2 other characters on the field. So quest for 3, massive character there. 3 copies of Calhoun. I like 3 copies of Calhoun, to be honest, because there's a lot of evasives around at the minute. She's not as effective as she used to be, but it is nice to put more pressure on the other aggro decks, because it just means they can't quest, otherwise you're gaining 2 lore. 4 copies of Doc, obviously Doc being utilised instead of a whole new world for this deck, which makes sense because we don't want our opponents drawing since we're trying to go quick. 4 copies of Smee, which I don't hate, and then 4 copies of Lovely Lady Family Dog. I absolutely love this card. It goes crazy in this matchup. So it's a 3 cost, and when you play it, you get to play a character with 2 cost or less for completely free, which means on your turn 3, you could be playing out Lady and a Daisy, Lady and a Piglet, Lady and a Smee, which is absolutely bonkers. If you've got your Piglet on the board from the previous turn, even if your other characters are wiped, you can play out Lady and then another card and then Piglet's question for free. This card is so hard to deal with, honestly. Got 3 copies of Lawrence, Jealous Manservant. 3 I'm a little bit happier with. Do prefer the 4, but 3 is not too bad. 4 copies of Pete to block the actions. And then we've got some spicy tech. We have the brand new Goofy groundbreaking chef. We saw somebody using this at Worlds, which is nice to see it used in another tournament. With Goofy, at the end of your turn, you can remove up to 1 damage from each of your other characters and then ready each character that you remove damage from. So in an aggro deck, being able to turn them back up again is crazy. Frank Carsten before used a strategy with the Simba card to re-ready the characters, and it made it so hard to beat because if you can't challenge into them, how do you beat them? They're so quick coming out that you can't rely on waiting to get to B-Prep, and this is what makes the deck so difficult for control decks. 4 copies of Rapunzel gifted with healing as standard. 4 copies of the Rhino Shift package, and then 4 and 4 for Storm and Strength. I really, really like this deck. This is Pirozzi Stefano. So Pirozzi, if you're watching this video, good job. We like this. Next up, in third place, we have, my God, Emerald Steel is back. Run for the hills. I hate playing against Emerald Steel. Stresses me out so much. There is nothing worse than when you run out of cards in your hand. And looking at this deck, it's going to be really good at ripping the cards out of your hand. It's really, really well built. This is by Zanni Angelo. So we have 4 copies of Diablo, Maleficent Spy, and then 3 copies of Morph. Morph, you can obviously shift a character onto it. It could be any character, which is a bit nuts. 4 copies of Ursula Deceiver, as well as 4 copies of Diablo Devoted Herald, as standard there. 4 copies of Prince John. Whenever you discard when he's on the field, you're getting to draw another card. And then what I really like to see is 4 copies of Ursula Deceiver of All. Ursula Deceiver of All, when she's on the field, she can sing a song twice. The card then goes back onto the bottom of your deck. But using cards like Sudden Chill to make you double discard when you've got John on the field goes crazy. Doing it on Let the Storm Rage on, which means you get to double draw and then deal 2 damage multiple times. Crazy. Using it on Strength, dealing multiple blocks of damage. Absolutely crazy. She's a broken card. She's terrifying. She is a bad woman, and we like it. We have 4 copies of Peak Games Referee, and then 2 copies of Chip, which we saw in the other Emerald deck earlier. Nice to see again, we have 2 copies of the Muses, just for a little bit of board control. Obviously, when you sing a song, or when you play a song, sorry, any characters with 2 strength or less can be returned to the hand, and you select which character that is. So if you sing multiple songs with Ursula, you can return multiple cards back, which is really, really nice. 4 copies of Beast Tragic Hero, which we're going to be shifting onto Morph. And then, Maui's in green steel, everybody. I like this. This was one of my favourite cards at the start of the set when I saw it. So Maui Stubborn Trickster, 4/4 stat line, 6 cost. When this character is banished, you can either put 2 damage counters on all opposing characters, banish all items, or banish all opposing locations. Anyone who plays green steel knows that they struggle quite a lot against Ruby Sapphire. It's a really hard matchup for them. Being able to wipe all their items on the board is really, really useful. Being able to stop them getting that Tamatoa line off is absolutely crazy. But in the quicker matches, like the aggro matches, where they go underneath them, 2 damage counters on every character, absolutely huge. I really think this is such a clutch card, and being able to quest for 3 as well, kind of scary. We have 2 copies of Pete Space Pirate. Obviously, shifting this onto your other Pete is really nice. When this character is exerted, opposing characters cannot exert sing songs. It ruins Steel Song. It's a nightmare to play against Steel Song. And then 5/5 stat line, questing for 2. But additionally, your pirate characters gain resist 1. Oh, look at that. Pete's a pirate. How convenient. He gives himself resist as well. Nuts. We have 2 copies of Baboon, which I'm assuming is to take out the other Diablos and opposing decks. 4 copies of Sudden Chill for our discard package. We have 4 copies of Storm and Strength as standard. 4 copies of Bruno. Beyond the Horizon. We like to see it. 2 copies of Beyond the Horizon. And then 2 copies of Hidden Cove, just to give our characters a little bit of extra protection. I don't really like playing with Hidden Cove myself. I find it a little bit bricky in my hands sometimes. However, it's nuts for protecting your Diablo and your Ursulas. Really, really useful to have that. Now, we're getting on to the spicy bits here. The main event, we have our second place and our first place. Before I go on to this, I'd be really interested if you could put your predictions in the comments, if you've not already cheated and seen the lists, of what you think was first and second place. I'll give you a hint. It was both the same colour. You ready? It was Ruby Saf. Who would have guessed it, eh? Ruby Saf winning another tournament. Absolutely crazy. Hear me out, though. It's not just one type of Ruby Saf. As you know, at the minute, we've got Ruby Saf split into the DKP style, which is the Shark Burn deck, and we also have the items list. So the final was a bit of a mirror, but not quite. In second place, we have David Restivo. He was playing the DKP style of deck, the Shark Burn list. Now, this is fairly similar to what we see with the DKP style, but what I do notice is he's kept in the Super Goofs, which DKP actually got rid of for Wilds. I do really like Super Goof. What DKP said about it originally was it's nice to just edge you over, being able to get the 2 lore each time they challenge with something. But the problem I found with Super Goof was, 1, everything had really high willpower, so it was just kind of wasting itself. And then 2, everything was evasive, so I wasn't really getting the use out of it, which is why I dropped it from my version of the DKP deck. For this, we have 4 copies of Tipo, 4 copies of Super Goof, 4 copies of Grammatala, 4 copies of Maui Hero to All, 4 copies of Maui Half Shark. Completely standard for this list, and we expect to see it. Little pro tip, when you are playing it, make sure that you ramp straight away. Your biggest priority is seeing Tipo or Sail. If I don't have either of those 2 cards, I'm getting rid of them straight away. Main thing to get. The Grammatala is really nice to sing How Far I'll Go on, so we really like that. And then Tamatoa we're using to cycle back our items, so the popsicles. We have 2 copies of Hades Infernal Schema, used to just stick a card in the opponent's inkwell, just clears the board a little bit better. 2 copies of Sisu Empowered Sibling, which I like. A lot of people have started to cut down on the Sisus a little bit, but I think it's so clutch, especially since we're seeing a lot of quicker decks again. 3 copies of Develop Your Brain, which is a little bit odd to see. We're used to seeing 4 there, as well as 4 copies of Sail the Azurite Sea, your other ramp card, 4 copies of Vision of the Future, which we're using to dig through the deck. I see a lot of people ink Vision of the Future, which I think is a massive misplay. Not only is it something that's great having out whilst you've got Maui Shark on the board, because you're getting lore for it, but you're digging 5 cards through your deck. Obviously, these are going to be going on to the bottom, so we want to make sure we can still get back to those other cards. Digging and searching for your deck is a massive part of the strategy here. 2 copies of Brawl, 4 copies of How Far I'll Go. For me, if I'm ever going first with this deck, I always want to see the How Far on turn 4. Well, turn 3 for this deck because you're ramping, but you do need to be careful with all the Ursulas about. We have 3 copies of Pirate's Life. Once again, I don't like that. I think 4 copies of Pirate's Life is a mandatory because your opponents are going to get ahead of you quick when you're playing this. You need to be able to bring them back down. 4 copies of B-Prep, which I like, 4 copies of Pork Skull, and then 4 copies of Muck Duck Manor. So a big well done to David Restivo. And then finally, in first place, we have our winning Ruby Saf items list, which is featuring Chicher? Oh, no way is Chicher back. I kind of like that, you know. Now, it's a little bit of a weird one, isn't it? When Chicher first came out, I really didn't like her because she just dies to any steel card. And I felt like by the time I got on the board, I was just wasting ink to play her because I wasn't getting the effects. Hiram was obviously a far better draw engine. However, with Flavsham gone, you do need something else, which is why we play the Maurice's Workshop. But I will say, with this deck, if they don't get that item package on the board and they don't pull into the items, they don't draw, and it's a really easy way around them. So Chicher could be a nice clutch way to be able to get them that extra draw power. With Chicher, 2 cost, 2-1 stat line uninkable. When you ink for a second time in a turn, you get to draw a card, which is why we're playing cards like Fishbone Quill, so we can make sure we're ramping on that second card, we get the draw. 4 copies of Belle, Apprentice Inventor. Belle, we want out on turn 1 if we can get her. Ideally, we're looking for Popsicle into Belle on the turn 1. 4 copies of Scrooge McDuck. Scrooge can be played by exerting 4 items. You can play him for free. When he's played on the field, you get to search your deck for next 4 cards, and you can reveal an item card, bring it into your hand. We have 3 copies of Maui Hero to All. I want 4. Put him back at 4, please. 4 copies of Tamatoa, Happy as a Clam, to cycle back your items. 4 copies of Sisu, which is a mandatory for this deck. A lot of people have been cutting B-Prep altogether, but I can see that Leonardo Zaccardi has kept B-Prep in, which I'm quite happy about. 3 copies of Tamatoa So Shiny. That's the same I run in my deck. With Tamatoa, when you play him, you can bring an item back onto the board, and then whenever you quest for 1, and then plus the amount of items that you have on the board, which is why it's really important to not let Red-Blue get too many items there. We have 4 copies of Sail the Azurite Sea as a nice little bit of ramp, and then 4 copies of Vision in the Future to search through the deck. Once again, the item decks don't normally play this, so it's quite nice to see. Hold on a second. They're playing Chicher instead of Tipo. That's brave, you know. It's a little bit of a weird one. One of the things I'm struggling with Ruby Saf items is I never know where it's better to go with Sapphire Call on the turn 2 or to go your Tipo or the Sail the Azurite Sea, because I want to ramp. I want to get to the bigger total because getting my bigger characters out is what wins me the game. But sometimes setting yourself up with a Sapphire Call can be a little bit useful. So it looks like here what they've done is they've given themselves the option for Sapphire Call, Chicher or Sail the Azurite Sea. It's a bit of a brave strategy and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but first place in a huge tournament like this, maybe that's something we need to be looking into. Maybe Tipo isn't as valid. The other issue with Tipo in the deck is you're putting an additional card into your inkwell, so you're running out of cards quicker. Like I said at the start of the video, if you don't manage to get the item package off and then you're using Tipo as well, you're really limiting yourself with the cards that you have available. You're playing against discard, you're going to have no cards left very quickly. 2 copies of Be Prepared, which I'm really, really happy to be seeing. It just pairs so well with the Sisu. So many times with Red-Blue, you can get into an overwhelming board state, and Sisu doesn't always clear it, especially if you don't have your Sapphire Calls active. Players are starting to play higher strength characters, so Sisu doesn't always clear. Of course, if you do have 3 Sapphire Calls on the board, you're just wiping everything, which is great, but it's nice also having your panic reset button there. 4 copies of Vitalosphere, which can also be played out on the turn 1 to get your bell out. But the main thing with Vitalosphere is being able to give your characters rush. We're really falling behind in this deck because we don't have a lot of characters. So being able to give a character rush when they are played, clear the board a little, really, really effective. 4 copies of Pork Skull, 3 copies of Sapphire Call, and then 4 copies of Fishbone Quill. I'm really happy with 4 Fishbone Quill. A lot of people have started to tech in Greatstone Dragon again, but I think Fishbone Quill just makes so much more sense for the deck. Especially since you're playing Chicher, just links really well. 4 copies of Maurice's Workshop, which works for me. Once again, we normally see 3 of that line, and then 1 copy of Lucky Dime. Now, of course, the best way to get Lucky Dime out is for your Tamatoa Happy as a Clam. Being able to get out for free is absolutely nuts, so really like that. Yeah, so some nice crazy decks there, really interesting to see. Please let me know down in the comments which deck you are most interested in, and are there any of these decks that you'd be interested in taking to set champs? I'm hoping to make a video this week on how you can do well in the set champs. I've got a really good record. I've taken mats at every set champs that I've played in. I regularly make top 8s. I think I've had 7 or 8 top 8s in every single set champs that I've done. So I look forward to making that video. But thank you very much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and have a lovely evening. See you later, guys. Bye.